"I'd rather die," the captive said when the cowboy paid $3. The frontier town sat under a pale evening sky, covered in dust and quiet tension. It was not a place people dreamed about. It was a place they ended up when life gave them no other choice. The wind carried the smell of dry wood and tired horses. Wooden buildings leaned slightly as if they were too weary to stand straight. People moved carefully, always watching, always measuring each other. The cowboy rode into town just before sunset. His horse moved slowly, both of them tired from days on the road. He was not looking for trouble or attention. He never did. He came to towns like this for supplies, a warm meal, and maybe a small job before moving on again. He had a quiet face and steady eyes. People who looked at him could not easily guess what he was thinking. As he tied his horse near the trading post, he noticed a small crowd forming near the side of the building. It was not loud, but it was not calm either. Low voices, tense whispers, and the sound of coins being counted floated through the air. He stepped closer, not out of curiosity alone, but because something in the tone of the crowd felt wrong. Near the wall stood several people, tired and silent. Their clothes were worn and their faces showed long days of hardship. A local trader was speaking loudly, offering contracts for work in exchange for money paid up front. It was common in harsh times. Some people signed willingly, hoping for a roof and food. Others had little choice. Among them stood one young woman who did not look down like the others. She stood straight, even though her hands were tied loosely with rope. Her clothes were dusty and her hair fell across her face, but her eyes were sharp. She did not speak. She did not beg, she did not move when people stepped closer to inspect her as if she were an object. The cowboy felt something shift in his chest when he saw her expression. It was not fear alone. It was anger mixed with pride. The trader announced a small price for her labor contract, explaining that she had refused earlier offers. Some men laughed quietly, saying she was too stubborn to be useful. One man stepped forward and offered a small amount. She shook her head and stepped back. The trader grabbed her arm firmly and warned her not to make things worse for herself. The cowboy's jaw tightened, but he did not move yet. He kept watching. Another offer came. Again, she refused. This time she spoke clearly, her voice steady even though her situation was not. She said she would rather die than belong to someone who saw her as a bargain. The words cut through the crowd like cold wind. Some people scoffed. Others looked uncomfortable. The trader grew impatient. The cowboy stepped forward then. He did not raise his voice. He did not push anyone aside. He simply asked the price again. The trader looked surprised but repeated the amount, $3. It was not a large sum, but in a place like this, it still mattered. The cowboy reached into his pocket slowly and counted out the coins. The metal clinked softly in his palm. He placed them in the trader's hand without bargaining. The crowd went quiet. The young woman turned sharply toward him. Her eyes flashed with anger. "I said I would rather die," she told him firmly. Her voice did not shake. He met her gaze without stepping closer. "Then you are free to walk away once we leave here," he replied calmly. "I did not pay to own you. I paid so you can choose." Murmurs spread through the crowd. The trader shrugged, already satisfied with the money. The rope around her wrists was loosened and removed. She rubbed her skin where it had pressed, never taking her eyes off the cowboy. She did not trust him. That much was clear. She had likely heard promises before. The cowboy understood that look. He had seen it in others who had been disappointed too many times. He stepped back, giving her space. "You can stay here if you want," he added quietly. "Or you can walk with me. Either way, no one here gets to decide for you anymore." The trader laughed, saying the cowboy would regret his kindness. The cowboy ignored him. He untied his horse and waited. For a long moment she did not move. The town seemed to hold its breath. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the ground. Finally, she stepped away from the wall. She did not stand beside him. She walked a few steps behind, keeping distance between them. They left the trading post without looking back. The road out of town was quiet except for the sound of boots against dirt and the slow rhythm of the horse's hooves. The cowboy did not try to start a conversation. He knew silence could be safer than too many words. After some time, he stopped near a small stream outside town. He handed her a water canteen without speaking. She hesitated before taking it. Her hands trembled slightly, but she steadied them quickly. She drank, then handed it back without thanks. He nodded as if that was enough. The sky darkened into deep blue. Crickets began their soft song. He built a small fire and kept his movements slow and open, never turning his back suddenly, never stepping too close. He removed a blanket from his pack and set it on the ground a few feet away from where he planned to sit. "You can rest," he said simply. "I will keep watch." She looked at the blanket, then at him. "Why?" she asked. It was the first question she had directed at him since they left. "Because the night is cold," he answered. "That's not what I meant." He stirred the fire gently. "I know." Silence returned, but this time it felt slightly different, less sharp, less filled with anger. After a while, she sat down on the blanket but remained alert. She watched him as he leaned against a tree, his hat pulled low over his eyes. He did not move toward her. He did not ask her name. He did not demand anything in return for the $3. Hours passed. The fire burned low. She studied him in the dim light, searching for signs of hidden plans. She found none. He looked tired, like someone who had carried heavy things for too long. Near midnight, she spoke again. "You expect me to believe you paid just to let me go?" "Yes," he said. "That makes no sense." He shrugged slightly. "Not everything needs to." She did not respond to that, but her posture relaxed just a little. The next morning, the sun rose bright and clear. He offered her bread from his pack. She took it after a short pause. They ate in silence. When he prepared to leave, he did not gesture for her to follow. He simply began walking. She stood there for a moment, watching him move down the path. She could turn back toward town. She could disappear into the hills. No rope held her now. No trader stood nearby. After a long minute, she stepped forward and followed him again. They traveled through dry fields and scattered trees. As the day grew hotter, he slowed his pace to match hers without making it obvious. When the road became rocky, he guided the horse carefully so it would not stumble near her. Late in the afternoon, she finally asked, "Where are you going?" "North," he said. "There's work at a ranch for the season." "And after that?" He looked toward the horizon. "We'll see." She nodded slowly. That answer seemed honest, even if it was uncertain. As the town disappeared behind them completely, she realized something she had not allowed herself to feel before. For the first time in a long while, no one was forcing her steps. She was walking because she chose to. Still, doubt lingered in her heart. She remembered the moment she said she would rather die. She had meant it then, not because she wanted to end her life, but because she refused to give up her last piece of dignity. Now, walking beside a quiet cowboy who asked for nothing, she felt confused. Hope was unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things were dangerous. As evening approached again, dark clouds gathered in the distance. A storm was coming. The cowboy noticed and picked up the pace slightly, scanning for shelter. She kept up without complaint. Thunder rolled across the sky as they reached an old abandoned shed near the road. He opened the door carefully and stepped inside first to make sure it was safe. Then he moved aside, allowing her to enter before him. Rain began to fall heavily, hitting the roof in loud waves. The shed was small, but it kept them dry. He lit a small lantern and placed it near the wall. She stood near the doorway, watching the rain. After a while, she spoke softly, almost to herself. "You don't even know my name." He looked at her, his expression calm. "You can tell me when you're ready." She studied him again, searching for mockery or impatience. There was none. The storm raged outside, but inside the shed, something quieter began to grow. Not trust yet, not friendship. Just a small crack in the wall she had built around herself. She turned slightly toward him. "I meant what I said back there," she admitted. "About dying." "I know," he replied. "I won't let anyone control my life again." He nodded once. "Good." The simple words surprised her more than any speech would have. The rain continued into the night, but for the first time since the trading post, she did not feel trapped. She did not know where the road would lead or whether she could truly trust the man who paid $3. But she knew one thing clearly. He had given her a choice. Morning arrived slowly after the long night of rain. The storm had washed the dust from the land, leaving the air cool and fresh. Sunlight pushed through the cracks in the old shed, drawing thin golden lines across the floor. The cowboy woke first, sitting quietly as he listened to the soft sound of water dripping from the roof outside. He did not rush her awake. Instead, he stepped outside to check the weather and prepare for the day. When she finally opened her eyes, she felt disoriented for a moment. The quiet felt strange compared to the tension she had lived with for so long. She sat up carefully, watching him through the open doorway as he adjusted the saddle on his horse. His movements were steady and calm, without any sign of impatience. He noticed she was awake but did not speak immediately. He handed her a small piece of bread and a cup of water. She accepted them silently. The distance between them still existed, but it felt less sharp than before. They began walking again once the ground had dried enough to travel safely. The road stretched ahead through open land dotted with small hills and scattered trees. Birds flew low across the sky, and the world felt wider away from the town's heavy atmosphere. She walked beside him this time instead of behind. It was a small change, but he noticed and respected it without commenting. For a while, neither of them spoke. The quiet between them felt more comfortable now. After some time, she broke the silence. "Why didn't you ask my name?" she said. He shrugged lightly. "Names matter when someone wants to share them." She thought about that answer. It was simple but respectful. After a few steps, she said softly, "My name is Alina." He nodded. "Good to meet you, Alina." She waited for him to offer his own name without being asked. When he did not, she raised an eyebrow. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "Daniel." The introduction felt strangely important, as if something had shifted between them. As the day grew warmer, the road became harder to walk. Rocks and uneven ground slowed their progress. At one point, Alina stumbled slightly, catching herself before falling. Daniel paused, offering his hand without forcing it. She hesitated but accepted the help for just a moment before letting go again. "You don't need to pretend you're not tired," he said gently. "I'm not pretending," she replied quickly, though a small smile betrayed her. They continued walking, occasionally sharing small observations about the land. Daniel pointed out animal tracks and distant hills, while Alina noticed changes in the sky and weather. Their conversation remained light, but it helped ease the remaining tension. By afternoon, they reached a narrow river crossing. The water flowed faster than expected because of the rainstorm. Daniel studied the current carefully before guiding the horse through. He turned to Alina and explained where to step so she would keep her balance. She listened closely, trusting his experience more than she expected to. Halfway across, she slipped slightly on a smooth stone. His hand reached out immediately, steady and firm. For a brief moment their eyes met, and she saw genuine concern rather than control. She pulled away once she regained balance, but something inside her softened. On the other side, they rested beneath a large tree. Daniel unpacked a small cloth bundle with dried food. He handed her half without hesitation. She noticed he always divided things equally, never giving himself more. "You treat me like a partner," she said quietly. "That's what you are," he replied simply. She did not answer, but she watched him more closely after that. As they traveled further north, the land changed slowly. Grass grew thicker and small farms appeared in the distance. Alina began to relax enough to ask questions about his past. He answered honestly but briefly. He had worked at many ranches, never staying too long. He preferred open roads to crowded places. He spoke of mistakes without going into detail, suggesting he carried his own memories of hardship. In turn, she revealed small pieces of her own story. She had traveled with different groups, searching for safety but often finding disappointment instead. She learned early to rely on herself, to keep her emotions hidden so others could not use them against her. Daniel listened without interrupting. He did not offer advice or judgment. That alone felt new to her. Late in the day, they reached a small abandoned campsite. Daniel decided to stop early, sensing both of them needed rest. He gathered wood while Alina watched, unsure how to help. Finally, she began collecting smaller branches, adding them to the pile without being asked. "Thank you," he said. She nodded, surprised at how natural the teamwork felt. As the fire burned steadily, they sat across from each other. The light flickered against their faces, creating soft shadows. For the first time, Alina felt curiosity stronger than suspicion. "You said you paid so I could choose," she said slowly. "What if I choose to leave tomorrow?" "Then I wish you safe travels," he answered. "You wouldn't be angry?" "No." The honesty in his voice made her pause. She realized he truly meant it. She stared into the fire, remembering the moment at the trading post when she declared she would rather die. She had believed every person who offered help wanted something in return. Daniel had changed nothing with grand speeches or promises. Instead, he changed things through patience. That night, as she lay under the stars, she felt less alone than she had in years. She listened to the sound of the wind moving through the grass and allowed herself to rest without fear. The next morning brought new challenges. Dark clouds gathered again, and strong winds swept across the plains. They walked faster, trying to reach shelter before another storm arrived. Along the way, they encountered a group of travelers heading south. Elena instinctively moved closer to Daniel, unsure of strangers. He noticed but did not comment. The travelers greeted them politely and continued on their way. Elena realized she no longer felt as defenseless as before. She carried herself differently, more confident, as if the simple act of being treated with respect had strengthened her. As the storm approached, they found refuge beneath a rocky overhang. Rain began to fall again, but this time she did not feel trapped by it. Instead, she felt safe sharing the small space with him. During the storm, she finally asked the question that had been growing in her mind. "What made you stop back there, at the trading post?" He thought for a moment. "You looked like someone who had already fought too many battles alone." She laughed quietly. "And you decided to add yourself to the list?" "No," he said softly. "I decided to stand beside you instead." The words stayed with her long after the storm passed. As evening approached, the clouds cleared, revealing a wide sky filled with soft colors. They continued walking, their pace matching naturally. The distance between them had changed from cautious separation to quiet companionship. Elena realized she no longer counted every step as an escape. Instead, she began to see the journey as something shared. When they stopped for the night, she sat near him without hesitation. They spoke about small things, favorite foods, places they had seen, and dreams they once held. The conversation felt light and honest. Before sleeping, she looked at him and said, "I still don't trust easily." He nodded. "You don't have to, but I'm starting to trust you." He did not respond with excitement or pressure. He simply said, "That's enough." As the fire burned low, Elena closed her eyes, feeling something unfamiliar growing inside her, not dependence, but the slow return of hope. The road became smoother as they traveled further north, and the land slowly changed from dry plains to greener fields. Trees grew closer together and the air felt cooler. Elena noticed small signs of settled life everywhere: fences, distant barns, and smoke rising from chimneys. After days of walking, the sight of a working ranch finally appeared on the horizon. Daniel slowed his pace as they approached. The ranch spread across a wide stretch of land, with wooden buildings standing strong against the open sky. Horses moved calmly in fenced areas, and a few workers walked between the barns carrying tools. It was not a fancy place, but it felt stable and alive. Elena felt a knot tighten in her chest. New places meant new people, and new people meant new risks. She had learned not to trust easily, even after everything Daniel had done. Daniel seemed to sense her hesitation. "You don't have to stay," he said quietly. "You can leave whenever you want." She nodded but did not answer. She kept walking beside him as they reached the entrance. A tall, older man greeted Daniel with a warm smile, clearly recognizing him. They exchanged a firm handshake and spoke briefly about work and travel. The man's eyes moved toward Elena with curiosity but not judgment. "This is Elena," Daniel said simply. "She's traveling with me for now." The ranch owner nodded respectfully and welcomed her without asking too many questions. That alone surprised her. She had expected suspicion or interrogation, but instead she received quiet acceptance. They were given a small cabin near the edge of the ranch. It was simple: a bed, a small table, and a window overlooking the fields. Daniel placed his bag near the door and stepped outside again, giving her space to look around. Elena stood alone inside the cabin, unsure how to feel. The room felt peaceful, but peace was unfamiliar. She ran her hand along the wooden wall, testing whether this place was real or just another temporary stop before disappointment returned. Over the next few days, she watched the rhythm of ranch life carefully. People woke early, worked hard, and helped each other without unnecessary drama. No one pushed her to explain her past. Instead, they offered small tasks: feeding animals, carrying water, helping prepare meals. At first, she stayed quiet, observing more than participating. Daniel worked long hours repairing fences and guiding horses. He spoke with others easily, but never forgot to check on her with a simple nod or small smile. He never hovered or made decisions for her, allowing her to find her own place slowly. One afternoon, a woman from the ranch invited Elena to help in the kitchen. The work felt simple but comforting. She learned small routines, laughing softly when she made mistakes. The other workers treated her like a normal person, not someone fragile or broken. Still, adjusting was not easy. At night, memories returned: old fears, moments of betrayal, and the heavy feeling of never truly belonging anywhere. She sometimes woke suddenly, expecting danger that never came. One evening, Daniel noticed her sitting alone outside the cabin, staring into the distance. "Too quiet?" he asked gently. "Too peaceful," she admitted. "I'm not used to it." He sat nearby but kept enough space so she would not feel crowded. "Peace takes practice too," he said. She smiled faintly at that. Days turned into weeks. Alina began helping with more responsibilities. She learned how to care for horses and fix simple tools. The work gave her a sense of purpose she had not felt in a long time. She started to laugh more, speak more, and move with confidence. Yet Daniel remained slightly distant emotionally. He was kind but careful, as if protecting himself from getting too close. Alina noticed this and wondered about his past, but she did not push him to explain. One afternoon, a group of new workers arrived at the ranch. Among them was a man who recognized Alina from her earlier travels. His surprised expression caught her off guard. She felt her chest tighten as he approached. He greeted her casually, but his presence stirred old anxiety. Later, she overheard him speaking to others, mentioning parts of her past in ways that made her uncomfortable. Rumors began spreading quietly. Alina felt the familiar urge to run. She had left places before when people started asking too many questions. That night, she packed her small bag, preparing to leave before anyone could reject her. As she stepped outside, Daniel stood near the door. He had noticed her behavior changing throughout the day. "Going somewhere?" he asked calmly. "I don't want to cause problems here," she said. "It's easier if I just leave." He shook his head gently. "Running isn't always the answer." "You don't understand," she replied quickly. "People change when they learn things." "Maybe," he said. "But you don't have to disappear just because someone talks." She hesitated, unsure how to respond. Part of her wanted to believe him, but fear pushed against that hope. Daniel took a slow breath before continuing. "Everyone here has a past. What matters is who you are now." His words felt simple but powerful. She looked at the cabin, the ranch, and the life she had begun building. Leaving would mean starting over again from nothing. "What if they don't accept me?" she asked quietly. "Then that's their loss," he replied. She lowered her bag slowly, unsure but willing to stay, at least for now. The next morning, she faced the ranch community with nervous energy. Some people had heard rumors, but no one treated her differently. Work continued as usual. Conversations remained kind. Slowly, she realized the fear had been louder in her mind than in reality. Later that day, she confronted Daniel gently about his own distance. "You help everyone," she said, "but you keep yourself separate." He looked thoughtful for a moment. "I learned that caring too quickly can hurt." She nodded, understanding more than she expected. They both carried old scars, just in different ways. As weeks passed, their partnership deepened. They worked side by side more often, sharing quiet jokes and small moments of trust. Alina felt stronger, more grounded. She began to imagine a future that did not involve constant movement. One evening, as the sun set across the fields, she watched the horses running freely. The sight filled her with unexpected emotion. She realized she no longer felt like a captive of her past. The ranch had become more than a temporary stop. It had become a place where she could breathe. Daniel stood beside her, watching the same scene. "You look different," he said. "How?" "Lighter." She thought about that and smiled softly. "Maybe I am." The journey that began with anger and mistrust had slowly transformed into something steadier. She still carried memories of the trading post and the moment she declared she would rather die, but those words felt distant now. Instead of fighting alone, she was learning how to stand with others, and perhaps for the first time how to truly belong. Life at the ranch settled into a steady rhythm, but peace never stayed perfect for long. The days were filled with work, laughter, and shared meals, yet an unspoken tension slowly grew around Alina. It was not obvious at first. It came in small moments. A stranger riding past the ranch entrance and watching too closely, a letter arriving with no name, or distant figures appearing along the hills before disappearing again. Alina tried to ignore it, but deep inside she felt something familiar. The past she had tried to leave behind was moving closer again. One evening, as the sky turned orange and gold, Daniel noticed her standing alone near the fence, staring toward the horizon. "You've been watching the road a lot," he said gently. She hesitated before answering. "Sometimes trouble doesn't stay gone," he nodded, understanding more than she said aloud. "If something is coming, we face it together." The words surprised her. She had spent most of her life facing problems alone. The idea of someone standing beside her without expecting anything in return still felt new. The following morning confirmed her fears. 3 riders approached the ranch slowly, their horses kicking up dust as they came closer. The workers paused in their tasks, watching carefully. The ranch owner stepped forward to greet them, but Alina felt her heart beat faster when she recognized one of the men. He had been part of her past, someone who believed she owed him loyalty simply because he had once helped her survive. His presence brought back memories she preferred to forget. The riders stopped near the entrance. Their voices carried across the yard, calm but firm. They claimed they were looking for Alina, saying she had unfinished obligations. The words made her feel small again, as if she were being reduced to something she had tried hard to leave behind. Daniel stepped forward quietly, standing beside her without blocking her view or speaking for her. He let her decide how to respond. Alina took a slow breath and walked toward the group. Her steps felt heavy but determined. The ranch workers watched silently, ready to support but respecting her space. "I'm not going with you," she said clearly. The man smiled slightly, as if expecting resistance. He spoke about old agreements and promises, suggesting she belonged with them. His tone remained calm, but his words carried pressure. Alina felt anger rise inside her, but she kept her voice steady. "I choose where I go now." Daniel said nothing, but his presence beside her felt like a strong anchor. The ranch owner spoke firmly as well, reminding the visitors that this was private land and decisions belonged to the people living there. The situation remained tense, but no one raised their voice. For a long moment, it felt like time had slowed. Alina realized she was not the same person who had stood at the trading post weeks earlier. She was no longer alone, and she was no longer afraid to speak. The riders exchanged glances before deciding to leave for now. One of them warned they would return, but their departure brought relief to the ranch. Even after they were gone, Alina felt shaken. She walked away from the yard, needing space to think. Daniel followed at a respectful distance until she stopped near a small hill overlooking the fields. "I thought I escaped everything," she said quietly. "Sometimes the past takes time to catch up," he replied. "I don't want anyone here to suffer because of me." He shook his head. "You didn't bring trouble, people make their own choices." She sat down on the grass, staring at her hands. "Part of me still wants to run." "That's understandable," he said, "but running isn't the only way anymore." His words stayed with her long after he left her alone to think. Over the next few days, the ranch prepared quietly for the possibility of the riders returning. Fences were checked, tools organized, and plans discussed calmly. There was no panic, only careful readiness. Alina watched how the community worked together, supporting each other without fear. She felt both grateful and guilty. The people here were willing to stand beside her, even though they did not know every detail of her past. That trust felt heavy but meaningful. One afternoon, she approached the ranch owner to offer leaving if it would protect everyone else. He listened patiently before shaking his head. "This place is about choice," he said. "You stay because you want to, not because we force you. And we help each other because that's who we are." His words made her realize she was not a burden. She was part of something larger. When the riders returned days later, the atmosphere felt different. Instead of fear, there was quiet confidence among the ranch workers. Alina stepped forward again, this time without hesitation. Daniel stood nearby but slightly behind, allowing her to lead. The man spoke again about past obligations, but Alina interrupted him gently yet firmly. She explained that she appreciated past help but did not belong to anyone. She thanked him for what had been done before but made it clear she would not return. Her voice did not shake. She felt strong, supported by her own decisions rather than anyone else's protection. After a long pause, the riders finally accepted her refusal. They turned their horses and left without further argument. As their figures disappeared into the distance, Alina felt something inside her release, a weight she had carried for years. The ranch returned to normal slowly. Work resumed, laughter returned, and the tension faded like a passing storm. One evening, as they watched the sunset together, Alina turned to Daniel. "I think I finally understand what you meant about choice." He smiled softly. "It's powerful. I used to think strength meant fighting alone," she said. "Now I see it also means allowing others to stand with you." He nodded. "You did the hard part yourself." She looked at him thoughtfully. "You helped more than you know." The days that followed felt lighter. Alina moved through the ranch with confidence, no longer watching the horizon with fear. She laughed more openly, shared stories with others, and felt connected in ways she had never allowed before. She realized the moment at the trading post, when she said she would rather die, had not been the end of her story. It had been the beginning of a journey toward freedom and trust. The ranch felt different after the riders left for the last time. The air seemed lighter, and the quiet moments carried a sense of calm that Alina had never experienced before. She woke early each morning, no longer with fear but with purpose. The rising sun across the fields became her favorite sight, a reminder that every day could begin without worry. Life returned to its steady rhythm. Horses needed care, fences needed repair, and meals needed preparation. Alina moved through her tasks with confidence, often finishing before being asked. The other workers treated her as part of the family now, sharing jokes and stories during breaks. She noticed how natural it felt to belong somewhere without feeling trapped. Daniel continued working beside her, still calm and steady as always. He never pushed conversations too far, but their silence had changed. It was no longer filled with distance, but with comfort. They understood each other without needing many words. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat near the edge of the fields watching the sky turn pink and gold. Alina felt a quiet happiness she had never known before. She thought back to the moment at the trading post when she had said she would rather die. That memory felt far away now, like something that belonged to another person. "I used to think freedom meant being alone," she said softly. Daniel turned toward her. "And now I think freedom means choosing who stands beside you." He nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. Over the next weeks, Alina began helping new travelers who arrived at the ranch seeking work. She recognized the tired expressions and guarded eyes because she had once carried the same look. Instead of asking too many questions, she offered kindness in small ways, showing them where to find water, teaching them simple tasks, or just sitting quietly so they would not feel alone. The ranch owner noticed her growth and trusted her with more responsibility. She helped organize supplies, guided younger workers, and even trained a new horse under Daniel's watchful eye. Each accomplishment built her confidence further. One morning, a messenger passed through the ranch bringing news from nearby towns. Among the stories were rumors of people still trapped in difficult situations like the one she had escaped. The news stirred something inside her. She felt a strong desire to help others find the same chance she had been given. Later that day, she shared her thoughts with Daniel while they repaired a fence together. "I want to do more," she said, "not just for myself but for people who feel lost." He listened carefully before responding. "What does that look like to you?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "Maybe guiding travelers, helping them find safe places, or simply showing them they have choices." He smiled faintly. "Sounds like you already started." His words made her realize how far she had come. She was no longer running from her past. She was using it to help others move forward. As autumn approached, the ranch prepared for colder weather. The days grew shorter and the air turned crisp. Alina felt a sense of stability she had never experienced before. She had a place, a purpose, and people who respected her. One afternoon, she decided to return briefly to the town where everything had begun. She did not go alone. Daniel offered to accompany her, but she insisted on going by herself. It was something she needed to do. When she arrived, the trading post looked smaller than she remembered. The same dusty street stretched before her, but she felt different walking across it. People glanced at her, but no one recognized the frightened person she had once been. She stood near the spot where she had declared she would rather die. The memory brought both sadness and gratitude. She realized that moment had been a turning point, not because someone rescued her, but because she chose to step into a new path when given the chance. A few people nearby were discussing work opportunities, and she noticed a young traveler standing uncertainly at the edge of the crowd. The look in his eyes reminded her of herself. Without hesitation, she approached and offered guidance, explaining safer options and encouraging him to think carefully about his choices. It was a small act, but it felt meaningful. When she returned to the ranch later that day, Daniel waited near the gate. He did not ask many questions, simply watching her expression. "How was it?" he asked. "Different," she said with a gentle smile. "I went back to close a chapter." He nodded, understanding without needing more explanation. Time passed quietly, and the bond between them grew stronger through shared experiences rather than dramatic moments. They worked together, laughed together, and supported each other through small challenges. Their connection felt natural, built on trust rather than expectation. One evening, as they walked along the fields, Alina stopped and looked at him thoughtfully. "You changed my life," she said. He shook his head slightly. "You changed it yourself. I just walked beside you." She considered his words and realized he was right. The $3 he had paid had not bought her future. It had only opened a door. She had chosen to walk through it. As winter approached, the ranch gathered for a celebration around a large fire. Music played softly, and everyone shared food and stories. Alina looked around at the faces glowing in the firelight and felt a deep sense of belonging. She no longer felt like a stranger passing through. Later that night, she stood under the stars, remembering how the journey began with anger and mistrust. Now those feelings had transformed into strength and hope. Daniel joined her quietly. They stood side by side watching the sky. "What happens next?" she asked. He smiled gently. "Whatever you choose," she breathed deeply, feeling calm and certain. For the first time, the future did not feel like something to fear. It felt like an open road filled with possibilities. She realized she had not only found a home, but also rediscovered herself. The person who once believed she had no choice now understood that every step forward was hers to decide.